Bienvenidos a otro episodio de Tomando Café con Jesús Hoyos, CRM en Latinoamérica de CX2 Advisory. Hoy pues vamos a estar, como siempre, hablando de café y los disclaimers, ya saben, estamos pues en LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter y eventualmente en Instagram y en mis podcasts. Y hoy vamos a hablar sobre el futuro de CX, nada más y nada menos pues con Sameer Patel, que es el Global CMO de SAPCX. I'm now going to switch to English. Hopefully you got all that, because I was like,
of course. As long as there's no quiz, right? I'm good.
Yeah, no quiz. So before I let Sameer tell who he is, what he's doing at SAP. I know him for many years. Part of the CRM or CX mafia. Paul Greenberg is
the original. I like to call it the OG. It's more the original gangsters.
The original gangsters, So we used to meet all these, SAP conferences, and before he was in SAP, in other conferences or having coffee or drinks or dinners. He's a foodie. You follow him. He's posting all the stuff that he cooks and what he eats. So and for those that I've been listening to my all my live streams, the disclaimer is that SAP is also a customer, so I've been doing some stuff with them, the CDP, and I had Esteban Koski as well in a couple of these live streams, but today it's all about Sameer.
That's a tall order, man.
I told him. So Sameer, tell us who you are.
Sure. So I am the newly minted. Is there an echo? Can you hear? I can hear an echo. Maybe it's me.
I hear you. I can hear you okay.
You hear me okay? All right. So I'm the newly minted Chief Marketing and Solutions Officer for SAP's CX portfolio. I'm about 25 days into the role. So this is quite. I think I broke it. The news when I was on Paul Greenberg's call.
Yeah.
And right after the call, I was having lunch with Ray. And so of course, Ray has to break it because it's Ray, right? And so we were having some fun at a nice little restaurant here in Palo Alto, and I think this is the first public interview or conversation that I'm having since I took the role. So and it couldn't be with a better person than me, which is
thank you.
Awesome.
What an honor.
So anyway, so I took the role, like I said, roughly about a month ago, and we're. Prior to that, I was at SAP for a year, helping the company figure out its cross-portfolio product strategy across the board, across all the board areas, where how we bringing all our products together. Prior to that, I took a year-long sabbatical, which was phenomenal. And before that, I was CEO of a company called Kahuna, which was Martech. And then prior to that, I was at SuccessFactors. So we got to know each other, Jesus. I want to say at the advent of social CRM Enterprise 2.0, where we were a band of people who had different careers doing their day jobs, but finding time to blog and write. And I think one thing that your audience needs to know about you, which I wonder how much to know about you as a person, is Jesus is one of those people who was truly he personified the essence of what we did as bloggers, where we were the anti-media because we all had full-time jobs, and we wrote to grow the industry over growing our own readership, right? So, the celebration of somebody else's good idea, building on somebody else's post, sometimes debating it and arguing it and refuting it too. But it was a tightly lit network of people who came together. And had we not brought that kind of personality to it, I don't think it would have survived as long as it did, because we were more interested in the higher purpose of getting the concept out than we were about readership to what we did. Because we all had full jobs. We weren't journalists looking for pages, right? And I think that as a foundation has led to some amazing friendships, right? That has nothing to do with what we do for a living. And there's so many others in the mix, right? So I don't think people realize what a big pivotal role you had to forward that message. Not only taking it to the region of Latin America, but also at a global scale, right? So
I do remember the back channel. discussing everything about social CRM. So those were the fun
they were the
times,
formidable days. Yeah, and actually, it took a long time, but a lot of things we do today, we don't call it social CRM, but it's the bedrock of a lot of the pieces of CX today, right? It's just here we are doing a live stream on 5 social channels, I think 5, right, together at one time. That is kind of what we said was coming, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And with coffee.
With coffee.
So are you a coffee drinker or?
I'm a coffee drinker. I'm a coffee drinker who spent maybe 20 years trying to find the best way to enjoy my coffee every day, and I never really found it. And drinking, going to stores, and I had about 7 different machines over the years that I bought. And one of the things that I did in COVID because of lockdown is I moved to a French press. And I have found that this is my true calling. This is the best way I like coffee. It beats any store that I go to. And so I just go buy good coffee, but I prefer the foam.
But do you buy it ground? Or do you grind it or?
Yeah, I grind it. So I buy the beans, right? And and I will I let it steep in 1 ounce of water for 30 seconds, and then I brew it for 4 minutes, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, every time that I travel to Latin America, I like to bring, coffee from the region, and I miss the time, going out and drinking coffee.
Yeah.
After a really, long lunch.
Right, not dinner. That's when the cigar comes out. I know.
Yeah, definitely on Thursdays.
Oh, is that a day? You have a cigar day? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Thursdays. Yeah, right after lunch. In Mexico is around 3-4 o'clock. After that, and then you continue, and then every other Friday or so. But right now, I've been promoting coffee from the region. I have this called Perfect Love, Amor Perfecto, and this one has a cherry flavor. Okay, and I have another one that they just one of our co-workers in Solvis came to Miami over the last weekend, and she brought me this one. And there's another one that has a grapefruit taste, so it's sour. And wow. This one is sweet, so it's cereza, mora, which is cherry.
Interesting.
It has I like to drink it, black.
Yeah.
So and having my coffee mug. That going back to that this is me. I don't know if you see it here, but this is me somewhere flying. The plane. So that's my daughter. I like to do mountain biking, the hiking. So
that's beautiful.
So she gave me this. So this is my cup. So
it's good coffee. It looks like good coffee. I'm a purist when it comes to coffee. I like the French roast and the Italian roast, and they keep it pretty straight down the middle. But I will try that for sure.
That's why I have this. So we know that there's different ways how to drink coffee.
There is.
So Sameer, now that you are in this role, CMO.
Yeah.
For SAP CX, and this particular space, this live stream is to talk about you as a SAP as a vendor, but as you were talking many years ago, we were talking about social CRM, and it's very much the same, but in a sense but a different now industry acronyms CX, because CRM has been evolving. We can tell that CRM is dead, but CRM is evolving into CX, and we as an industry, like data transformation, innovation, CX, CRM, we have different flavors, different meanings, and it has to do about platforms, architectures, pricing, modules, omnichannel, culture. How do you guys, how you see in SAP, how you perceive this evolution, for CX? Because you guys were pretty much there. Many years ago, you started mentioning, it's no longer CRM, it's CX.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think I guess before we talk about sort of products and what we do and all of that, right? Like, I think it's really important to level set on, the problem statement, if you will, right? Which is, where are we right now, right? And where's the customer right now? Because pretty much nothing really matters if you don't get that right, right? And identifying a snapshot of where the customer is today. And I do think that as much as it's sort of an overused and maybe a tired conversation to have about COVID and post-COVID and pandemic, the reality is that I don't think there's probably any other space that is going to be more transformed than what we've been calling the CX space. in a post-COVID environment, right? So, I spend my 27-day career in this role spending more time thinking about that than I do about anything else, right? Which is what is the customer has, the slate has been wiped clean, right? In terms of, what their post-pandemic footprint is going to look like. And by that, I mean, what permanent behaviors have been created through the pandemic, because it is a global phenomenon. We can talk about it, it's not about it hit some part of the region, it doesn't, nobody else cares. No, it hit everybody. And it changed certain behaviors in terms of how we work, what we expect from brands, what we expect from people that we do business with. There are it has massive impacts on subscription pricing and subscription models for doing commerce over over typical sort of checkout based sales, right? And I think that every single one of us, your buying patterns, your wife's buying patterns, at home have all been entirely changed, and a lot of that will stick, right? Every time you go and you look outside your doorstep and there's 3 pairs of shoes when you know that your wife or your daughter is going to keep, just one of them. I mean, who's thinking about the operational margin impact on the retailer from that reverse logistics buy, right? Right? What does that actually mean to CRM? Why have we been buying toilet paper as a one-time thing all our lives, and why the hell weren't we always buying it as a subscription? Like, what was the point there? I don't know, right? The amalgamation between retail, online, and offline, where I can go and return something at a Kohl's store that I buy from Amazon. The surge in footprint on offline because of online. It used to be the other way around. Offline was moving to online. You start adding up those as like 3-4 different sort of tectonic shifts, and there are about 20 we can talk about. It is about time for everybody to just take a deep breath and sort of really start to understand, like, what is the snapshot of the B2B buyer and the B2B2C buyer, right? And you kind of back that into what your products are. So, when I think about that, a couple of trends start to make sort of a ton of sense to me, right? First is the R, and I wrote a whole blog post about this 5 years ago, right? And I read it just literally last week, and I'm like, man, who knew COVID was coming, right? Where, it's about putting the R back, and I keynoted actually, I think, some of the CRM events on this topic, which was, putting the R back in CRM, right? And CX is really a manifestation of that, right? If you think about it, it is about uplifting the R and giving it sort of like its relevant place. But I think, though, that the market generally, and this is me sort of like, again, putting on, how I think about what got me excited about taking this role at SAP when the opportunity came, right? Is that, it's just like this silly discussion we've had for so long, right? About like the back office and the front office, and the back office is dead and it's all about the front office, and vice versa. That just think about how silly that entire discussion was when you think about sort of how we're transacting at scale in online commerce right now. When I have 3x of my products going back to a customer, right? Or if I'm a retailer and 3x of my products are coming back, please try telling me that the logistics part is not the front office anymore. When my customers' experience is just as dependent on how easy it was to return it, so it gave me peace of mind to buy a product because you made the returns difficult or easy, please tell me that's not CX.
And
right?
I mean, that's the new front end,
So, okay, I can keep going, right? So you get where I'm going with this, right? Tell me that the in a B2B context, that the invoicing process and how easy it was to invoice somebody is not as important to the shopping cart capability, right? So, when you start looking at, okay, that's another one. Tell me that if your family or if sustainability is an important topic to you, you're using X product versus Y product.
Oh yeah, every day.
Tell me that you don't care about the carbon footprint of that product going all the way into the supply chain, or you're just happy because are you just okay because the retailer you buy from says I'm sustainable in how I run my business, right? I was thinking the other day that I think it was somebody, it was actually one of our board members, I think it was Elizabeth Thomas, who said this in an offhand. It was striking to me, right? Where, my wife drives an electric car, which which is great for many reasons. Gas, this, that, good for the environment. You know what I've never stopped to think about is how sustainably does Tesla build a car? So the car is sustainable in that it doesn't use oil. I get that, which is great.
But the battery is not.
So my point is, here we are talking about this. So when I think about, SAP's place in this industry, right? CRM and what you do in CRM and your position and how big you are and small you are in market share was winnowed down to the sum of your traction in like a commerce product or a sales product or service product. But I look at our measure of success in CRM and in CX as what is the effect we're having across the demand and supply chain for a customer. And to me, that is the new measure of success for CRM, where these disconnected, disparate systems, or somebody charges you a ton of money just to use integration technology to bring X and Y together. It's all irrelevant. What is that across the demand and supply chain? Like what are the value flows that are happening for a customer? How easy is it for them to transact with you? How much visibility are you giving them deep into the supply chain? And then combined with that is the flexibility to start anywhere they want, though. Like, this is not about whole-scale transformation, rip out your back end and rip out your front end. That's not the point, right? The point is start where you want, but can you plug something in that can start to give you visibility across that tapestry? So, that's sort of like the North Star, if you will, right? Of like how I look at the category and what excites me about having a part to play in this category, and more importantly, gives me a ton of confidence about how SAP can be massively relevant in the category, right? So I don't know, that kind of helps you kind of lay the land.
Well, because one of the key things, going back to what you're saying, the example of Amazon and Kohl's, because we live it here every day. We have a Kohl's 2 blocks from my house. Is the ability to get closer to your customer, get closer to your to your consumer, and that brings the last mile or the first mile, to be able to execute on that right away. I mean, you can be extremely well, selling me something. You could be extremely well doing the delivery, but if you don't navigate and you're not able to change quickly to any of the things that are happening out there, COVID, being on the top, but be able, based on data, be able to change that. That's, I think, when I say data, I'm not talking about the shopping cart data. I'm not talking about the opportunity data. I'm not talking about the marketing automation data. That's there. That's given. If you cannot do that today, you're in trouble. Period. I mean, forget about it. But if you want to be able to deliver that CX, you have to bring everything together.
You do, right? So underneath all of this also is this exactly what you said, which is what, on one hand, what is the underlying, when we talk about like big words and acronyms, which are really sort of terribly, and carelessly used in our industry, right? So, when you talk about like, what is CDP, for example, right, in a customer data platform? The definition of a customer data platform has been very conveniently narrowed down by, the vendor landscape, frankly. And it doesn't have a customer lens on what a CDP or a customer data platform really needs to be. Because if you truly want to have customer data platform and you want to be able to have the insight to be able to be agile and move left and right, these artificial limitations about certain kinds of data sets that have to be like the main thing that's in a customer data point, back to our conversation earlier, right, about what really is the front end anymore? What is the back end anymore, right? Like where are the data levers within that allows me to serve a customer better, frankly, to upsell a customer, to effectuate essentially probability and trends of data, right? And like what's going to go, who's going to churn when, who's buying enough, what's the velocity. That data is the underlying data that sits across the demand and supply chain. So I think there's like, to me, that's a really important point where I'm not saying every customer has to spend, unteams amount of money and time getting it all right in the beginning, but you need to know that your platform is scalable and has the right connections to suck in those data points as you start to get more sophisticated, right, in your analytics.
Yeah, on my CDP live stream that I'm doing with the SAP CX guys from Latam, I talk exactly about that. I have my briefings, with you guys and understand everything. But at the very end, a CDP to empower CX is not just the magical customer 360, is access to that data.
Yes.
And
yes.
going back to what Esteban Koske is saying, that we have some agreements and disagreements in those conversations. You should just learn Spanish just to understand what we're discussing.
I don't need to. I can see the body language and I know it's not.
But the actual interaction point that you can provide, not to the company, but to us, the consumers or the customer, B2B,
yes.
B2C, or direct to consumer or marketplaces,
mm-hmm.
and I have access to that data as a consumer and be able to act on it and give the empowerment to the employee anywhere, from the beginning as a visitor on the store, shopping cart, until you provide the repeating. If I buy the subscription model and buy more and more for you, you have that access and you empower your employee. That's for me, the CX.
100%. And I couldn't agree more with you. And I think that's the, hang tight, more to come. I'm here 25 days, so give me a bit.
I know, and that's and many vendors, you guys are one of them, but there's many clouds, there's many platforms, there's many ecosystems, public versus private, module, inbound versus outbound, multi-channel versus omni-channel, and at the very end, we need to be sure that whatever the solution that SAP is going to put together, has to be simple.
Yes, and I think it's here, and I think we've got very simple and consume models, right? We have luckily we're at a point right now where we've got solutions that fit at different parts of the stack, right? So if you look at what we do with our Marcus business, right, and you look at what we're doing with CDP in a bunch of different places, there are very easy to consume, solutions that are designed for velocity, right, in terms of how they work and how they scale. And as you go up the stack, yes, you might find solutions that are a little more sophisticated because the scale and the heft at which they have to work are a little more scalable. But one of the things that is super exciting about our platform is that you've got many entry points depending on your business, the sophistication of business, what you're doing, right? You even look at the top end with commerce, for example, right? When you look at some of the most complex high volume SKUs, and by high volume I mean like top 1% in the world for retail, right? Top 5% in the world for retail. We've got that kind of scalability to manage that. And the conversations today are very interesting because they're all about this feature here and that feature there. There's just not enough talked about at levels of scale that you need in your business. Can you plug something in that can actually outlive the growth I might have over the next decade or what have you? Because pulling these things out is really difficult. I think the second thing too that I'm finding as a somewhat of a newbie into the industry, if you will, right, for some of our product areas too, is that I chuckle when I see how many man-made complications exist in the naming and the nomenclature and the product grouping for certain products, right? So, for example, if I'm buying a modern marketing automation system, right? How do I do modern marketing automation without an awesome CDP just natively in there, right? As a base case.
And why it has to be called marketing automation? And why does it need to be inbound versus outbound?
Yeah, there's all those things, which is essentially vendor slicing and dicing, right? And I'm one, but I'm the first one to say that there's a need for a customer lens and a jobs to be done lens, if you will, on how this thing gets laid out. And the solutions need to wrap around that, right? Especially when you're selling and you're talking to customers in the mid and the upper mid market, right? What is that combined intended experience that brings parts of commerce and parts of customer data intelligence and parts of marketing automation, in there, designed in a way and executed in a way that allows this to sort of flow, because that's 40% of your organization right there, right?
Yeah, and there's two key things that I would like to mention. From my perspective, looking at SAP, is you do the from the customer data platform, you do the identity management. It's already part of your product. Okay, and that's a very key point, because we as consumers, we have many interaction points with the brands or the brands, in one particular big enterprise, And number two, you can consume all the data that you have in the back office, in the back office, being now the front office, everything that is, supply driven, orders, all that, the last mile, invoicing, delivery, all that stuff, which, you're already out there. If I bring that and then I say, my CDP, even though I might start thinking that I want to do my CDP to do marketing, you need to have that framework in order to, deploy all that completely. It doesn't matter, which other tools you have, but you're thinking from the consumer lens, not from the marketing lens, but from from the customer lens. And I think that's the advantage that I see with what you have.
That's a huge advantage, right? And I think we are we talk about three different topics, right, that are related to what you're saying, right? One is, obviously the CDP part of it, which is really the data platform part, right? There's consent and identity, right, which is very tied to that as well, right?
Let me bring this point, because when we say consent, we forget what that means. If you have 5 of those 5,000 MarTech products, and you had your CRM and you had your supply, a management system, all of them have their own individual consent management system.
Sure.
They have their own, opt-in, opt-out. Okay. They have their own GDPR processes.
Yeah. Right.
And if you want to provide CX and you want to be omni-channel, that has to be not from the technology or brand or product that you sell perspective, is from the customer perspective.
Right.
Because sometimes we mention that very loosely, consent, but it's complicated, so
super complicated.
And that for me, that's a big plus that you provide with your identity.
Yes, and I think that's the way we've approached it, right? Which is, and even if you look at what we're doing outside of CX, but at the foundational level with our BTP, which is our business technology platform at SAP, one common data model and things like that are baked into that as well, right? So we're thinking about it broadly exactly for the reason that you said, which is, whether it's a CX use case or a this use case or a that use case, ultimately, these are all artificial boundaries created by vendor categories, right? Like you said, from a customer viewpoint, why is in a certain instance today at 12:27 Pacific time, for something that I'm doing, what I care most about is not my order history, it is my logistical data, because something's not shown up and I got to get a plane on Sunday, right? And that has nothing to do with my shopping cart. But it is absolutely, in my mind, a bad or good CX problem. So, in a siloed way in the world, and with very sort of specialized vendors who do one thing or do 5 things, versus from where we sit, we look at this multiplier effect as SAP, because 1 + 1, when you connect systems in certain ways and actually let data flow between them, the value is not a sum of it, it's a multiple of its parts, right? As you sort of snowball that effect. So you'll see, that to me is sort of the North Star of, breaking these human-made boundaries around what is CX and what is not CX and what's in and what's out. It's complete horseshit, right? It's look at it from the customer standpoint and not from how your org is set up as a vendor or how you build products and who owns which product. That's not the customer's problem.
So Sameer, knowing, that, you take 27, you said today.
Well, that's something like that, yeah.
Something like that. And knowing that, you have, an industry with a bunch of terms out there, and you guys already been focusing in CX, and CRM is evolving, and you have CDP, you have call center products, you have integration products, data quality products, of course, sales, marketing, customer service, field service, your multi-cloud. What are the challenges that you guys have at SAP to provide that message so people understand that it's simple to do? Because that's what people are asking me a lot. How simple is X versus Y? How can I minimize the complexity? Because I cannot afford another pandemic and not be able to be simple enough. And I want to put it.
I think go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I mean, listen. I think it's a fair question, right? It's a fair question, but I think Some of it is rooted in sort of historical myth, to be honest, as well, right? Like, yes, like, sure, do we have some complex products? Yes, we do. But it's a bit of a broad brush, I think, that gets painted on this topic when it comes to us, right? Because the reality is, yes, we, like when you talk about CX, yes, we have some very complex products, but guess what? They are solving massively complex problems as well. In certain parts of the market, the problems are complex, requiring products that are complex to solve those problems, right? While someone might say a top-end product is complex, I would like to revert that and say that, at SAP, we have, what you get for some of that complexity is we have over 1,000, or I think 1,300 employees at SAP who do nothing but work on globalization. The scale at which they can light up commerce in hundreds of countries, right? There are things that take complexity for a certain strata of the market. Now, what we often don't talk, and this is my job to fix, so I'll put that on the table too, at least for CX, right, is, look at Immersis, look at CDP, look at Gigya, look at some of these very modern, lighter weight solutions that we have that are easier to get up and running, that give delivery, and that have a shockingly small time to value footprint, right? It depends on where you start and what your problem set is to solve, right? So I would say here, I'm not in any way denying that, yes, we've got some stuff that is complex, but I think you've got to unpack it, right? And see, are you playing in that part where you need the complexity and you embrace it because it's a sophisticated problem, or you're at that level which is much more high volume, high velocity, right?
It's interesting what you're saying, because whenever when the Sapphire used to be on site, your event in Mexico, Orlando, or Barcelona, Madrid, I got a chance to meet with your customers one-to-one, customers from all over, especially from Latin America. What you just mentioned resonated now, with me, because you're providing global solutions, and that's very key, because when you look for the CRM perspective, sales, marketing, service, the traditional, it's not a global solution.
Yes,
it's a very B2B, B2C for this market solution. And when you're trying to scale that to other countries or to other industry, because now the rest between all you guys, SAP and the others, is become industry end to end. That's a challenge. And I think if you bring that global knowledge to the front, being CRM, the marketing automation, the MRCs, and so on, it's going to be very interesting. I mean,
it is.
Because that's part of the issue today we have, in Latin America.
Yes, and by the way, also, like when I say globalization, right, like I don't mean just different currencies to transact in, like of course we do that, but I'm talking about by-country compliance issues. I'm talking about tax issues in each country. Like we take care of all of that, right? It's built in. You don't need to bring somebody else to come to do that. So, I'm always a little careful when this broad brush of complexity comes. I'm like, I get it. I think we can be a lot simpler in many parts of the company and our portfolio. I'm not denying that at all. But but it's something that like we take quite seriously, right?
Simplicity brings complex stuff that you don't have to deal with it. That's part of the equation. But that's what simplicity means. Be able to buy many tools with different pricing models, many tools that 100%, 80%, 90% integrated for a particular industry, for a particular market, Brazil versus Mexico.
Sure.
For SMBs, to what we call pymes in Latin America versus large enterprises. And that's what we want to do. That's what I see in the market in Latin America, people to do that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like, I think, I'd love to spend some time with you later too, right? And just sort of get your viewpoint on, because I got to know the markets really well in Latin America because of Corona, right? We had a lot of customers in Latin America. So I was in Buenos Aires a couple of times, and I got to know the MarTech space reasonably well there, with the B2C MarTech space specifically. But I'm pretty excited about the portfolio that we have in your markets, right? Like, look at what we're doing with a whole bunch of products. I mean, top-end, high-end, high-volume commerce, we have it, right? Sales and service, we've obviously had for a long time. The Immersis platform and CDP is super exciting for your markets, right? It's a data-driven conversation with really sophisticated MA sitting next to it. I think we've got a ton of stuff that fits right in your wheelhouse, right? For where you spend your time.
Perfect. Sameer, I don't want to take more time from you. I wanted to keep this in 30 minutes. We talk about coffee for 5 minutes, so we're almost there. Okay. I really appreciate you, taking time to do this.
Thank you.
I know you're quite busy. And I've been talking to you people. They didn't know that I was talking to you. They said, "Oh, send me the link. I want to know." And I think in some companies you had to follow the PR stuff. Sameer was gracious enough to say yes, like 30 days ago. It just takes time, but I really appreciate Sameer.
Anytime. I think I always get into trouble just because people like you and I have known each other for so long, and it didn't take the formal channels for us to get involved. So when my buddy Jesus calls and says, "Let's get on a camera," I'm like, "Let's get on camera."
Right? So Sameer, one more last question. From the marketing point of view and the industry point of view. Do you see the future of SAP? And since you already have a new CMO as well, a global CMO for everything,
Julia White, who I report to.
Mm-hmm. Do you see, SAP becoming the CX company, and there's nothing else? There's just CX?
No, I do not see that. I think we've got some really amazing markets that we play in, and we have a right to win in multiple markets, right? Ultimately, as long as customers expect really high-class systems that power their entire demand chain and supply chain, I think we will be doing a lot more than CX. What I can tell you is that it is a super important category to the company, and I wouldn't have taken the role if I didn't feel like it was. And we're only getting started. We have some amazing stuff that we're going to do over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Excellent.
Couple of quarters.
Perfect, because everybody's saying that they're the CX company.
I think we do pretty well in business networks. I think we do pretty amazingly well in HXM and in HR, and those are amazing businesses.
Fair enough. So, Sameer, thank you again.
Thank you, Jesus.
Este ha sido Jesús Hoyos de CRM en Latinoamérica, tomando café. Y hoy, pues ya saben, estuvimos pues con Sameer Patel, Global CMO de SAPCX. Gracias, Sameer. Nos vemos hasta la próxima. Muchas gracias. Cuídense.
Bye.
Thank you, Sameer.